Good afternoon. I'm here to read you guys some Bible stories. Well, not Bible stories, but, um, you know, stories about God and creation and stories about the Lord. These stories didn't come from the Bible. That's why I'm not going to call them Bible stories. But today's stories is on creation. And the first one I found was, did God create evil? The university professor challenged his students with this question. Did God create everything that exists? A student bravely replied, yes, he did. God created everything? The professor asked. Yes, sir, the student replied. The professor answered, if God created everything, then God created evil. Since evil exists, and according to the principle that our works define, who are then God is evil. The students became quiet before such an answer. The professor, quite pleased with himself, boasted to the students that he had proven once more that Christian faith was a myth. Another student raised his hand and said, can I ask you a question, Professor? Of course, replied the professor. The student stood up and asked, Professor, does cold exist? What kind of question is this? Of course it exists. Have you never been cold? The student snickering at the young man's question. The young man replied, in fact, sir, cold does not exist. According to the laws of physics, what we consider cold is in relatively the absence of heat. Everybody or object is susceptible to studying when it has or transmits energy. The heat is what makes a body or matter have or transmit energy. Absolute zero is the total absence of heat. All matter becomes inert and incapable of reaction at the temperature. Cold does not exist. We have created this word to describe how we feel if we have no heat. The student continued, Professor, does darkness exist? The professor responded, of course it does. The student replied once again, you are wrong, sir. Darkness does not exist either. Darkness is in reality the absence of light. Light can study, but not darkness. In fact, we can use Newton's prism to break light down into many colors and study the various wavelengths of each color. You could not measure darkness. A simple ray of light can break into a world of darkness and illuminate it. How can you know how dark a certain space is? You measure the amount of light present. Isn't this correct? Darkness is a term used by a man to describe what happens when there is no light present. Finally, the young man asked the professor, Sir, does evil exist? Now uncertain, the professor responded, of course, as I have already said, we see it every day. It is in the daily example of man's inhumanity to man. It is in the multitude of crime and violence everywhere in the world. These manifestations are nothing else but evil. To this the student replied, evil does not exist, sir, or at least it does not exist unto itself. Evil is simply the absence of God. It is just like darkness and cold, a word that man has created to describe the absence of God. God did not create evil. Evil is the result of what happens when man does not have God's love present in his heart. It's like the cold that comes when there is no heat, or the darkness that comes when there is no light. The professor sat down. The young man's name? Albert Einstein. Submitted by Richard. I just gave that story a thumbs up. Let's see. Master of all. This will be a poem. Can you count the stars in the sky, or the trees around the earth? Can you count the raindrops that fall, or the joy at a baby's birth? Can you count the angels dancing on pinheads, or the ants deep in their holes? Do you know the substance needed to create a human soul? Can you count the extent of love for us that comes from our precious Lord? Can you count the price of the world He gave, complete with necessity stored? Is there anything too great for God? Is there anything too small? No, my brother, there's nothing. He is master of it all. By B. Killebrew. Trees. Only God can make a tree. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear the necks of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who imminently lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. By Joyce Kilmore. And the last one for today, God and Man. Consciousness of God is only known by man, but go ahead, use logic, rebuff him if you can. But when argument is over, you will see what must be true. Where there is not a God, there also is not going to be a you. By B. Killebrew. So that was today's stories on creation. Tomorrow, if we do stories, it'll be on a different subject. I hope you guys have a good rest of this evening and night. I love you guys. Let's bring those souls to Jesus, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, God willing. Bye, guys.